Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Leppy Duels, presented by Jarvie Media. I'm your host, Jacob Arvidsson, and it is week 17. Though there's nothing super special about the number 17, we did hit 250 subscribers last weekend, and we want to celebrate with you guys. So we've got a giveaway for you this week. The first item we are giving away is a 2022 Leprechaun Hollow Skins Match signed hat by all the competitors. If you haven't watched the coverage from last year, go back and watch it. Fantastic event. Clint Calvin, Reed Friscura, Andrew Marweed, and Trevor Harbolt all signed the commemorative hat for you. We'll send that out to you along with your own custom Leprechaun Hollows Disc Golf Club Grip 6 belt. So those two items will be going to the winner. Stay tuned for the end of the episode. We'll tell you how to win and how you can go about doing that. So we wish you all the best of luck. Thanks for being with us. We appreciate all of you. If you're new and joining us for the first time, here's how the show works. In a moment, you will meet our 4 distinguished guests. Each of those guests will go 1v1 with the other 3 contestants. Within each duel, each contestant will have 1 minute to deliver their points on the assigned debate topic, along with an additional 20 seconds to respond to their opponent's comments. After that, I as the host will determine a winner of each duel, and the first one to fill up their scoring bar wins the episode. Let's meet this week's cast. First up, joining us after his first ever win on the show last week, he's the owner of Crew 42, Zach O'Haron. Next up, matching up with Zach in the first round, he's returning after a few weeks on break. He's the owner of Still Bangin' in Houston, Texas, Mr. Matt Stillwagon. Our third panelist this week is the brand manager at Latitude 64, fresh off a brilliantly run event at the Portland Open. Give it up for Seth Fenley. And finally, rounding out the cast, he's the captain of Team Discraft Underground, Wes Shinovar. Thanks for joining us, all 4 of you. I am excited to have you all back on the show this week. Let's get into it. Matt and Zach, you'll be up first. Matt, you're going to lead us off. This past weekend, one of the big stories was McBeth taking on the European field and the Estonian Open. He struggled. We all know that. He came in 31st place. What's your takeaway from his performance in Estonia this past weekend, Matt?
I'm going to make this simple. We are not overreacting. I'm going to put it to you this way. The great thing about the evolution of the game is that there are more people writing about it, and writers like people to read. And so they take the minutia, the small things. I mean, this season is a big grind. Big whoop, okay? So he didn't have a good tournament. It's nothing. In the grand scheme of things, it's really nothing. It's a lonely place at the top. Stop micro-analyzing this stuff. I mean, let's get back to disc golf and not be the National Enquirer of disc golf.
All right, short and sweet. To the point for Matt. Zach, where are you taking this one? What's your reaction to McBeth?
Yeah, I think there's 2 kind of stories that came out of this. Talking about stats, I'm going to break it down here. I love doing, analyzing, going in deep. Really, the big story with McBeth is that he lost to Joey Sunglasses, and that's kind of surprising. I love Joey Sunglasses. He looks cool, but the fact that he lost to him is a big indicator that something was off with Paul. In fact, if we look at Paul, he was ranked 83rd in gained C1X. He was 74% from C1X, which is 16% less than his season average. If he had gained the 9 strokes he would have hit, going up to his average, he'd be competing for second place. And I don't think we should really overanalyze the winner, Mari. I mean, we look at him specifically. His highest rated round going into that tournament was 1048. His 3 rounds were 1049, 1045, and 1060. Some guys have, caught lightning in a bottle. He did that weekend. We shouldn't compare that performance to Paul necessarily. And really looking at Paul's individual performance statistically, we can see where he was struggling in one category that kind of kept him out of it. So I don't really think there's an overreaction to have here. Paul had a bad event. He averaged less than 1,000. We can try to over-exaggerate it, but it's not the end of the world.
All right, both of you kind of leaning the same direction here. Not the end of the world. Let's not blow this out of proportion. It's one event in the grand scheme of a full season. Matt, go ahead and respond to Zach's comments and double down on yours.
Okay, so since we quasi-agree on how this is breaking down, I'm going to say something to his statistical points. Look, over the course of the career of Muhammad Ali, there were several people that knocked him down, but the man got back up and still wins the fight. But you don't think that one time that guy knocked Muhammad Ali down, you think that's not the story he tells at the dinner table? I'm all for the parody of disc golf. I enjoy seeing a different winner. And those guys may not be able to compete with the big dogs every single day, but if this is the win that keeps them coming back, then guys like McBeth are going to say, I'll see you later because your name in my book is added cash.
I love it. Zach?
Yeah, it's an event we can see statistically again that Paul is definitely the one who kind of struggled in one specific area is definitely glaring that his issue is here that we don't need to over exaggerate. Really, the big story for me, takeaway outside of Paul individually from the event itself, is really that like European disc golf is better than Japanese disc golf. Like that's what I would take away from this more than anything else. Like that's what it looked like to me. So I mean, just looking at the field, it was good to see some players play well, but I mean, that's the big storyline that we get out of it. No big surprises here. Paul had a bad event. That's what it was.
All right, so again, you guys both kind of summed it up the same way. Off event for Paul, one hit wonder or one hit unwonder, however we want to phrase it, but one bad event. So how am I going to determine the dual winner here? Matt, I loved your point about the story around the dinner table, so to speak, for, in this case, the 30 people that beat McBeth on the weekend, but they still beat him, and that's going to be a story they tell for a long time. Absolutely. Good point there. Zach, I'm going to lean toward you on this one with the statistics, though, mainly because you pointed out, hey, the winner of this event averaged some really, really good golf on the weekend, and had Paul played well, he still might not have beat him. So I think that's an important point. So for that reason, I'm giving you the win here in the first duel. Sends us to duel number 2, Wes and Seth. Wes, you're up first. Nate Sexton lost a 15-plus year cash streak at Portland this past weekend. I want to hear your thoughts on cash streaks in general. Are they overvalued, and what's your take on those? Wes?
Yeah, Seth's probably going to try and throw a bunch of numbers and stats at you, but I think this is more of a subjective question and more of a kind of how do you feel about it. I think cash streaks are a good indicator of the longevity of a player at a high level. We've seen Nate Sexton win majors. We've known the name Nate Sexton for so long, not only from being on the course, but from his work off of the course too. And I think the name Nate Sexton at this point is bigger than a cash streak, but how newsworthy are cash streaks? I think they're kind of a lower tier newsworthy status. Again, it does show the longevity of a player that they've been playing well for a long time. They haven't had any bad events. We just talked about McBeth having a bad event. They haven't had anything outside of the cash point. And when you look at the events that Nate Sexton has played, primarily a lot of Disc Golf Pro Tour, a lot of majors the last several years, I think that's important that he has cash at all those events. Maybe brings the Nate Sexton cash streak conversation a little bit more elevated than the other players. I think that's certainly why this has kind of been newsworthy. But if you look at the other players that are on cash streaks, kind of lower level news to me.
All right, Seth, what's your take?
Yeah, so I don't really have a lot of stats. I do have a lot of information, so we'll roll with this. So, the Pro Tour put out a nice article about cash streaks earlier today and referenced 3 other players alongside Nate Sexton. They referenced Cale LaVisca, who was going neck with neck with Nate Sexton until LBC last year. Chris Dickerson was another one, and then they dug deep and went all the way back to Ken Climo's cash streak, which ended in 2013. And I think that there are storylines to be had there, but to Matt's point in the previous debate, like it's really just people looking for something to write about. I don't think that there's much else there, and there's 2 other reasons to that. The first is tour versus non-tour. Wes hints at this a little bit, but there are plenty of other players who have just as long of cash streaks, and we don't even know who they are. And that's because they're not out there doing it on tour. And so I don't necessarily think that the streak itself is newsworthy. I think it is the person. And then the second is DNF versus competition. I think that anytime a player DNFs, they lose that cash streak. And what you're saying here, if you make a cash streak newsworthy, is that you're pushing someone to compete even when they might not should be competing due to health or injury.
All right, good points from both of you guys. take those points a step further and try and tell me why you deserve to win the duel, Wes.
Yeah, I think just the longevity point. Nate Sexton again playing so many big events for so long and not taking any weeks off. Seth does make a fair point about DNFs ending cash streaks, and so that means that Nate Sexton has done what he needs to do to keep his body healthy. More recently, it's been just playing less events and just kind of focusing on the events that he is playing. But again, I think that this is newsworthy because it's Nate Sexton and because of the streak that it was at. But if you start looking at all of the other streaks that are out there, especially right now, I don't find them nearly as interesting, other than maybe just a light talking point or a good slide for Disc Golf Pro Tour like Seth mentioned. But otherwise, I don't find that these are super newsworthy, aside from Sexton's and just the longevity and what he was able to do.
Seth, take it home.
Yeah, so because this is over, right, it's a blip on the radar. And I think that that sort of answers it definitively that as far as newsworthy goes, it's the person, not the cash streak. And there are several other things that I sort of brought into this that we need to take into consideration, such as other people who have cash streaks and they're not even being brought up in the news. And my heart goes out to all of those people because they're working just as hard and not getting the recognition. But then, more importantly, I think the injury or risk of injury side of things with people trying to fight through to keep that cash streak alive. I know that Sexton had a few rough rounds where he was just trying to maintain that, and same with Caleb Viska. These are two guys who, yeah, sure, they're stalwarts on tour, but maybe they could have done even better if they had been able to not play through an injury, regardless of how minor it was.
All right, again, good points from both of you guys. You both kind of said the same thing at the end. Just as far as cash streaks themselves aren't necessarily newsworthy, it's the player that has the cash streak that drives the newsworthiness. In this case, Nate Sexton, obviously a stalwart, a legend of the game. Losing the cash streak for him makes the news, but at the end of the day, the cash streak itself is whatever. I think I'm going to lean towards Seth here. A couple extra points than Wes. Gives you the advantage here in duel number 2. Wes, you get another crack. You're right back up. You're taking on Matt. If you guys are playing a putter-only round with your buddies back at home, are you letting your friends throw a zone? Wes, you're up first.
Yeah, absolutely. First off, you can see that on screen. It says putt and approach. Putt and approach. It says it right on the disc. But I think more importantly, if you're playing a putter-only round, you need to kind of define what a putter is, and I think to really definitively do that, you need to kind of define what a mid-range is, and then kind of work your way down. And so for me, when I'm defining a mid-range, I'm looking at the diameter of the disc, the speed of the disc, and for me that 5 number I think is a solid number for looking at mid-range discs. And so what that says is that anything that is a 4 or less is going to be in the putter category for me. Now, I think that there are certainly throwing putters and there are putting putters. And when you look at a zone at a 4 speed, that's more of a throwing putter, but we're still using the word putter. Key word in a putter-only round. So anything 4 speed or less, which a zone is, to me, is a putter. So let them throw the zone.
Wes says yes. Matt, what do you say?
All right, I'm going to preface by saying this. Number one, the man works for the team that my son plays for, and my son bags a zone and probably takes more money from people from 200 feet and in with a zone than anybody else you'll ever meet out here in Houston. Okay, I'm just going to tell you that right now. My son is deadly with a zone from 200 and in. If he pulls it out, everybody holds their breath. That said, you've had some similar takes from people tonight, so I'm going to take an opposite end just to spice it up for you, Jacob. 3/4 of what a player does is based off of their skill, not the disc. And 9 times out of 10, most people can't putt with a zone accurately. It's like throwing a horseshoe to them. So in that regard, they've got to put so much chutzpah behind it, if you will, that it is a mid-range for them and is a mid-range for the average person. Just because Paul can throw the crap out of it and get it to look like a putter doesn't mean that Joe Blow Noodle Arm can. And so therefore, I'm saying it's a mid-range. Don't throw it.
All right, good stuff, Matt. Thanks for differentiating the argument here. Matt says no. Wes says yes. Take it away, Wes.
Yeah, again, it says putt. Putt and approach on it. You can throw it, you can putt with it. It is a more throwing putter, but again, a putter only round you can bring your zone for your sidearms and your forehands and your stable shots, and then you bring your roach, your Chally SS, or your Fierce, or your Luna, or whatever else you want to putt with to get the disc in the basket. But putter only round, I'm absolutely bringing a zone, and I absolutely think with it being a 4 speed in that putter realm, definitely allowed.
Matt, can you win the duel?
I can. Here's what I'm going to tell you. If we're going to go this route with it, let's have some fun. I'm bringing a Quest Technologies wheel to your putter only event. Why? Because it's labeled as a putter. But is it a putter? No, they got it wrong. I'm sorry you boys at Discraft have been around since God was a little boy and knew what a frisbee was. But I'm just telling you right now, it's not a putter. You labeled it wrong. It's okay. This is why God puts erasers on pencils.
I love it, Matt. Thanks for taking that direction. Thanks for taking that spin. I actually thought, so before I tell you the winner here, I actually thought Wes opened the door for you by bringing in the speed of the disc. I thought you could have slammed that in his face a little bit and thrown it back at him. But you missed that opportunity. For that reason, I am giving Wes the win here in duel number 3. Sends us to number 4. Zach, you're taking on Seth. Zach, you're up first. We saw cuts implemented at the Elite Plus event in Portland. What's your take on cuts in general? How should they be implemented on tour overall, Zach?
Yeah, I am a big fan of cuts, and more cuts. Big fan of this. I'm a big fan specifically cuts that are more like better luck next year rather than harsh cuts like we see in golf where it's like half the field. So if you had, for example, a 3-round event, let's say Silver Series, you can cut the 25% of the field at the end of that round. And that means at the end or the third day you come around, you have 54% of the field still active and in play. And that gives you a lot of benefits. It's a smaller field, which means you have smaller variance of weather potentially with first card and last card teeing off closer together. You have later start times so players can sleep in potentially. And this is even better, that the people who are doing the broadcasting can make sure they manipulate the time that their lead card is in prime time of the day. When the views are going to happen, they can make sure that their time is there rather than dictating when everyone has to fit in there. It also even allows players who are not in the event. So if you struggled, let's say it just wasn't your weekend, your normal, pretty good, maybe give you an extra day of travel to get to the other course to prep for that. There's a ton of benefits for this, like fewer backups. All these things are really good. So yes, I think it's an awesome thing that we should be doing. We should be doing more of it. I think for 3-round events, you could do 25% cuts after each round. For 4-round events, you could do 20%. And then for 5 rounds, you could do 15%. And I also like it because we talked about Nate Sexton's cash streak ending. If he had kept this cut strategy, he would have still been playing and only down by 5 strokes in that last cash. He might have been able to keep it going. It kind of has extra stories in there like that. We can keep that going with the names, stuff like that. So I like it. More cuts. Get them going.
Seth, what's your take here?
Yeah, so coming into this, I knew that Zach was going to have a pretty wild but well thought out take, and so I tried to keep it simple. And the simple answer here is that the Pro Tour pretty much has a standard that they've already put in place, and that's if there's a 4-round tournament, there'll be a cut after round 3. And I think for starters, that's the best place to start. The cut after round 3 allows people to establish themselves. It allows people to get a feel for the course or courses. The downside to Zach's plan is that you have people who, if they have just 2 off holes, they're gone after the first day, right? And that doesn't necessarily create compelling golf, especially when you look at some of our fields where players are coming from 80th and 75th place after the first day and making it into the top 10. You want those comeback stories. You want those stories where people are rising up through the ranks. And so I think there is a standard. The standard says after the 3rd round on 4-round tournaments only, and that's what we should go with.
All right, so Zach, Seth had an opportunity to kind of say his own statement and respond to yours a little bit. So respond to what he said and drive home your points.
Yeah, so the cut strategy right now after 3 rounds is at the cash line. So if you're 1 stroke out of cash, okay, then you're out. And Seth brought this point up himself. We talk about people in the 80th place who have two crazy hot rounds finishing top 10. However, if we talk about statistically, a person sitting one stroke off of last cash is way more likely to make a bigger push in the last round than a person who takes 80th or 85th or 112th after round one. The cut strategy I would propose, the percentage after each round, really eliminates kind of those people who just aren't in contention. Their chances of making the comeback, being in the top 10, are really, really small. It happens so infrequently. I don't think that we're actually eliminating good content or even relevant players. If your two holes are that bad, where you take 117 because you're +5 and the leader's at -12, I mean, you probably shouldn't be playing that weekend anyway. You should have laid up at some point. So for me, I don't think that we need to kind of go to those people. We don't need to coddle them and say, okay, stay in it, keep going. If you're not in it because you're in the bottom 10%, 20%, better luck next year.
Good stuff, Zach. Seth, respond.
Yeah, so if you look at the parity in the field right now, the parity is in the players, not in the scores. And so outside of the dead last card after day one, most of your scores are still in the single digits over par. And what that means is that a 5 under round is getting those players back to even, which is getting them into just outside of cash. And a 10 under round is actually getting them up into the top 30. And so that sort of change in variance shows that there's already competition in the field and that we don't need to cut people at the rate that Zach's saying we should cut them. But more importantly, when we cut to the cash line, what that does is it allows players to actually go for stuff and try to move themselves up the ranks on the final day because they know they're getting paid. Whereas other players, whenever they're right outside that cash line, sometimes play a little bit more timid just to try to keep from getting out of cash and not making the cash at the end of the day. So I think that the cut to the cash line, the cut after round 3 is the way to go.
All right, so at the end of the day, you both said we need cuts, they're necessary, they're good for the game. So we agree on that. However, the approach is different from both of you. And the differentiation clearly comes on when do we implement the cut. Zach says slowly implement it as we go on after each round. Seth says no, 4-round events only or beyond, obviously, if we're talking about Worlds. But 4-round events we need to cut after round 3. So what's the difference? Seth says parity. Zach says, hey, the guys that shot like garbage in round 1, they weren't in it anyway. It's an interesting line to determine who wins this. But I think Seth made a couple more points, and I think the parity is what we need to look at here at this point in the sport of disc golf. So Seth takes the win, which means we're going back to Zach. You're taking on Wes, and we've got some drama on social media this past week. Maria Oliva and Brodie Smith. What's going on? Whose side are you taking? Wes, you're up first.
Yeah, so to give a little more information about this for anybody that hasn't seen it, Maria put out a tweet. Apparently Brodie asked her to be on the podcast. She said, you've never introduced yourself and you've been within 5 feet of me or something. It all feels a little bit petty to me. I feel like maybe we've talked about this before and we've talked about it on this episode, but just finding stories to get some news out there about disc golf. At the end of the day, I don't know that either of these people actually agree with the things that they're saying or are being said. We'd have to ask them to figure that one out. I guess if I gotta choose a side on this one, I don't know. I guess I choose Brodie's side to go on. Both sides seem kind of silly to me, but it seemed like Maria's take was maybe a little harsh that he hadn't introduced himself to her, when he was around and stuff. Brodie's a pretty nice dude, certainly a big personality, but, anybody who goes over and talks to him, whether you're a professional player or a fan, he's always ready to engage with people. So, yeah, it's a little tiff. It's another little storyline, but I don't make too much of it.
Zach, whose side are you taking here?
All right, I'm going to say that it matters a little more than you think. Twitter is a really strange animal for social media. If it's short and offhand, it's probably there for funny. Her first sentence, I have it right here. It's actually easier to express myself in writing than with a complete stranger in a studio for clout. If she had just posted that and cut nothing else, it would have been funny. It would have been gold. No one checks Brodie at the door. It's great for disc golf, just like for people talking about it. It's just good overall. Then she adds the second sentence. And in Twitter world, when you add the second sentence over there, you start getting to paragraph world, all of a sudden you care. So Maria goes out of her way to say, well, not only am I going to make this statement, now I'm going to go on to talk about you haven't been within 5 feet of me. That's ridiculous. You've never introduced herself. Well, she never introduced herself either. So in terms of who I'm siding with, I agree. Brodie is the one who is a little less ridiculous in this situation. I do disagree, though, that I think that Maria does care. I think she really is more passionate than what than Wes is leading on. I think maybe you could read more into that, but it is interesting that development from the beginning, really, because Maria had an original tweet to Cynthia talking about she being tired, injury prone, long courses. That was gas. That was super funny. And then she was teed up with Brodie to give that one comment and hit a home run, and everyone would love Maria, and she would be our champion. And then she said the second sentence, and down it went.
Zach's got some passion behind his take there, Wes. Go ahead and respond to his comments.
Yeah. I mean, if we really want to dig into this, let's look at the clout sentence, right, where she's like, Brodie's seeking clout. First off, Brodie doesn't need clout from anybody. Brodie's absolutely one of the biggest names in disc golf, even when he's playing bad. If you go look at his fan page on Facebook, there's thousands of people that are interacting with him all of the time. Brodie does not need the clout. If anything, Maria is actually making this tweet saying that Brodie needs her for clout when she's actually using his name for clout on Twitter. So again, does Maria really care if she's trying to go that route with it and just sort of be sneaky little gaining some clout from this tweet? You know, that's a little bit more emotional, or maybe it's satire, who knows? But yeah, I mean, again, I'm on Brodie's side. The question is, whose side are you on? I'm on Brodie's side, and I think the whole thing is a little silly.
Zach?
So I'm going to interpret that statement that you just gave the complete other direction. I don't think she was saying that Brodie was seeking clout as much as that she would be getting clout by going with Brodie. And so I think she was trying to make the statement of saying that I can do this on my own. If I want to do these things, I can do them. I don't need you, a person who has been disinterested in me, to carry me to get me more exposure. And so I think she's very passionate. I've filmed her at River City. I've met her a couple of times. She's very passionate. She's very outspoken. She is very much on Twitter when she makes her statements and stuff. So she does express herself there often and regularly. I don't interpret the clout thing in terms of Brodie, because that'd be also accusing Yuli of like running a clout factory, which I don't think she's trying to state. Because I mean, Yuli's one of the most respected people on tour. I don't think anyone's going to walk up to Yuli and be like, "You're a clout factory." That just doesn't make sense. So I interpret her talking about it in the other direction. So but again, I think Brodie's right. I think that's the correct stance. But I think she is passionate about it, and I think she's talking about wanting to kind of develop that on her own, indirectly at least.
Good stuff from both of you. Wes, I love that you led off saying, hey, this is just another example of kind of what's been brought up, a theme this whole episode of events that maybe really aren't that newsworthy, we're just talking about them and making them newsworthy because we're bored or whatever. I think that's an important point. Good stuff from you. At the end of the day, this is a petty argument between two high-level players. So that is what it is. However, Zach, I love the passion. I love your points. I'm giving you the win here in this duel. Sends us to the final one. Seth, you've got a chance to win the episode with a clean sweep. Matt is standing in your way. Seth, you're going to be up first. We had the PDGA Global Board of Directors, the final 6 candidates announced this past week. I want to know who are your 2 candidates that you're going to be casting your vote for at this point. Seth?
Yeah, so before I dive into my 2 candidates, I want to talk about 2 other things related to this year's elections that I think are really important. The first is the development of the nominating committee. And there's a lot of questions surrounding it. There's a lot of questions as to who's on the nominating committee. But more importantly, the second part to this is that when you go to read the article, you can see that there were 13 people who put their names forth to be running, and only 6 of them got chosen. But we have zero clarity or transparency as to why those other people were not chosen. And I think that's going to cast a lot of doubt on the election. That being said, I have 3 people that I'm definitively not going to vote for, and I have 3 people that I'm still trying to decide between. So the 3 people I'm not going to vote for: James, he's too new. He doesn't have the experience that I'm looking for in a candidate. Adam. He has been around for a while, but he hasn't been as active as I would like to see someone who's going to be on the board of directors. And then finally, Tim. Tim is a guy who has ran for 4 different years now and has not been elected. I think that he has some growing to do in his position before he's going to get the clout he needs to win. And so that brings me to my other three. Definitively, and I've done this for the past 2 election cycles when he's been on the ballot, Jeff Hungerford gets my vote hands down. He is one of the most reasonable people that I've met that is passionate about the sport, and he's been around for a while. The person that I'm going to vote for second, or at least that is in my decision between the two, is Luke Turnbull. I think that Luke has an interesting perspective coming from Australia, and we need the diversity of having someone from outside of the U.S. And what that leaves is the big man himself, Nate Heinold. I think that the thing that's keeping me from voting for him for one more term is the potential of conflict of interest of all of the other things that he's doing. I think that question comes up a lot, and it gives me a little bit of pause in casting my vote for him.
Fair enough. Thank you, Seth. Matt, who are you voting for?
Okay, look, we had these topics out here, and I swear to God, we're like matching up yet again here very closely. Jeff Hungerford is hands down a guy who should get everybody's vote. One area that Jeff is very passionate about, that I too am passionate about, is the age-protected circuit. About 5-6 years ago, the age-protected circuit is where old guys went to go have fun. And now it is a far more competitive circuit with a lot of guys who maybe had an injury in their prime and are now coming back into it, who deserve another shot at some limelight. And Jeff aims to do well in that particular regard. I too had Luke Turnbull in there as well. For similar reasons, the international side of it is definitely something. You can't really call it global and not have an all-American presence. It just is not a good deal. And yes, I'm calling Canada the 52nd state in that regard. So let's just put it that way, okay? Adam was one of the other people that I had on there. And interestingly enough, the reason that I chose Adam is because with his resume, what he has been involved in speaks to possible financial avenues that should be explored by the PDGA to take this thing forward. I think that those are all great. I'm going to take 1 second to address something that I agree with Seth about on this, and that is the formation of this selection committee. Where we will differ on that is this. You and I both know the reason that those people were not put on there is that their views are considered to be too controversial, and we as a sport cannot make up our mind as to which rules we're going to follow when. So until we make our mind up about that, there's going to be a problem with allowing outside voices to come in and effect real change.
Good final point there, Matt. I'm glad you brought that up because, yeah, the selection of these final 6 candidates is kind of gray for a lot of people. So I'm glad Seth brought that up. Matt, I'm glad you said that. Seth, respond to Matt's comments.
Yeah, so I think that I'll start with the last one first. I think that it's true, but the reality is that the lack of transparency more than anything only adds fuel to the fire in those discussions. And some of the people on both sides feel like they're being silenced, and this tool of a selection committee is being used to silence them. And I think without the transparency, it really is going to throw a cloud over this. At the end of the day, the one thing that we didn't really get addressed from Matt that I think I brought to this was a holistic view of all of the candidates, right? Matt agrees with me on voting for the same 2 people, which I think that tells you alone a little bit about the quality of those people from the selection committee, but also what we're both looking for. At the end of the day here, I think some of the other things that I mentioned as far as Heinold's background and some of these other candidates should help put me sort of over the top on what we're looking for out of this voting cycle.
Matt, can you stop Seth from winning the episode?
I can, and ironically enough, he opens the door to do so with his opening comments about this selection committee. The answer is that we don't have the best candidates, because we don't know all the candidates. And that is the true problem with this. I agree that there is a lack of transparency. But in fact, until we recognize that that the boots on the ground, the tournament directors that are operating out of the back of their car running B tiers and C tiers for their local clubs, those people have an interesting view on what goes on the day-to-day. We're so focused on the tour, as we should be, but what we're not focused on is we're losing sight of what the core values of disc golf are all about. We're losing sight with it by just trampling over different ideas. And therefore, those candidates that have these different ideas do not fit the round hole that the PDGA wants their candidates to fit in. I say it's time to take out a hammer and start nailing some square pegs through that round hole.
Good stuff from both of you. Obviously, you agree on who you're going to vote for out of these 6. So we won't address that at all. That's pretty cut and dry for you two. But Matt, I love your final comments. Seth, again, I'm glad you brought that up, the transparency or lack thereof within the selection of these 6 out of the original 13. Matt, I love that you drove it home. Again, driving the different shaped peg through the PDGA's circular hole there. So well done. Matt wins this duel, sends us to a tiebreaker. Seth and Zach. Seth, you're going to be up first on this one. You are tasked with outlawing one specific shot from the sport of disc golf, one specific type of throw. What are you outlawing, Seth?
Yeah, we're gonna get rid of the roller. Rollers are for chumps. And it's not effective distance, right? You have the whole purpose of disc golf is the flight of the disc. And a roller is not the flight of the disc, it's the rolling of a disc. And so if in this hypothetical world, if I'm outlawing one shot, I'm outlawing the roller because it's taking away the spirit of the game in some aspects, just because we're looking at the flight of the disc. That's what drives a lot of people. That's what they say was what got them hooked on the sport of disc golf in general. You don't ever hear anyone say, "Oh, I got hooked because I threw a cut roller that went all the way to the basket on my first drive." And so that's the shot I would get rid of. I think that Zach's gonna come up with like 4 other things that he thinks we should get rid of, but none of them are gonna be as good as getting rid of the roller.
So Zach, you're coming up with 4 things, says Seth. What are your 4 things?
I don't need 4 things. I need one thing, and I've got it right here. Because there's only one correct answer. I've talked to a couple people about this. It's step putts, 100%. Here's the thing. With rollers, they don't violate the rules, right? We aren't sitting here arguing, oh, is that roller going to be legal? It's a difficult shot to do. It requires a lot of risk because once it touches the ground, it no longer is in your control. The ground has a lot of leeway on how things roll, skip, and other things. So there's risk involved in doing that. And saying that it's not part of the game is like saying the disc skipping off the ground and getting a second air shot is also not part of the game, because the disc is meant to fly once, not fly multiple times, once hitting the ground. So I don't think that's a valid argument. It's step putts. It's problematic because right now it is not policed well in the sport. It's incredibly illegal. Look at AmNats from 2021. Ilkin Grow, awesome, not taking it away from you. That's an awesome tournament from him, but he 100% takes a huge, giant foot fault because he does a step putt at the end to steal the win from Paul Kranz before they go over to Worlds and Paul gets him back. It's a problem. Why are we talking about something that's not illegal from the sport? Step putts, many of them are illegal. Ban it. Just don't let them do it anymore.
So Zach has taken a very practical approach. Seth is taking a hypothetical approach to this. So there's some differentiation there for sure, beyond the fact of the 2 throws are obviously different types of shots. Seth, why do you deserve to win this episode?
Yeah, so step putts are really interesting because there is a lot of sort of digression between people on whether or not they're good or bad. But the outlawing the step putt would be sort of the gateway to changing a lot of the different ways that we approach our stance, right? And so if we say we're not going to do a step putt, what's next? Are we going to tell people that they can't do a run up when they're out in the field? I think that the reality of how we throw the disc, right? When we're on the tee pad, we have as much of a running start as we can get as long as we release the disc before we get to the edge of the tee. Whenever we're on the field, we have that same aspect of running through. The jump putt is in that same vein. The same rule is that you have to release the disc before you cross the plane of your lie. And while yes, it's not policed, The reality is that it fits in the spirit of the game, and it is throwing the disc, right? It is that flight path that I'm talking about, as opposed to the roller, which is just rolling a disc down a fairway. And you can do that, in a few different ways. Sometimes, not even like letting the disc really come off of the ground. You throw it immediately straight into the ground to roll. Whereas a step putt, I think, is still a continuation of how we're throwing the disc originally. So that's why I think rollers should be the ones outlawed.
Zach, bring it home. Can you win back-to-back episodes?
I think I can here. So let's address a couple of things here. So different ways to approach the lie. No. Okay. If we want to talk about throwing, from the field, right? Those are called. Foot faults are called. There's a very famous video, Scott Stokely throwing 3 times from the same lie, because they go, that's a foot fault. You are not behind your lie. It's very clear that you're not behind your lie. Step putting is trying to squeeze the gap here and saying, you can't tell if my foot hit the ground quite yet or if my foot came off. And so I'm going to gain this 3 foot 4 advantage being closer when I release my putt. That's taking advantage. It's illegal by doing that. So, and it's, again, not police. So if it's not going to be policed right now, if players are not feeling encouraged, incentivized to do anything about it, then get rid of it. If they can't do anything about it, then make it illegal. And as for the rollers, I mean, we talk about every sport evolving in different ways. Things that players had never seen before, adding to the sport or change the sport in awesome new ways. Look at basketball. There was never a three-point line. It wasn't designed. You weren't supposed to shoot from way farther out. And all of a sudden, players started doing it. And they said, we should make a three-point line. And then they did. And the game evolved. And people said, this is really interesting. Teams that were farther behind can catch up faster. And now we say Steph Curry revolutionized the game. Again, if you look at the way the game was created originally, was never intended to do that. And the game has evolved. Rollers have part of the game that help it evolve. Eagles roller race in that video is amazing, right off the rut and in. That's spectacular. It's an addition to the game. It's an awesome weapon to have. I don't think it defeats the purpose. I think it's a tool in your arsenal, and I think it's something they can figure out because it's difficult. I love it. Get rid of step putts. If we can't police them, get rid of them. Tired of them. Let's not talk about that no more.
So I love that you guys both took a different spin on a pretty simple question in 2 different ways. Obviously the shot type itself, but then how you approach the question too. Zach, again, very practical. Seth saying, hey, I don't really like the roller. I don't think it follows through with how the disc is designed to be thrown. So well said for both of you. Thanks for those points. I think that was a great tie-break round. Seth, I'm going to address you first. The flight of the disc, I think, is a huge point and an important one, and a lot of people fall in love with the game through the flight of the disc, like you said, and rolling a disc down the fairway is not making anyone fall in love with anything. So well said from you. However, Zach, the practicality is, it is what it is. I'm not awarding you anything on that. I think your points to back it up are what is going to give you the back-to-back Leppy Duels win. The floor is yours, my man. What do you got for us?
Never thought I'd win in a million years. Seth is a great competitor. I thought he had me for sure, but I wasn't really prepared to win tonight, but thanks to everyone for watching. If you haven't already subscribed to Leppy Duels, make sure you do so. All these guys are awesome. Make sure you follow them around. They have some amazing things to say. And thanks for having me on the show. Back to back.
All right, Zach, again, just celebrating the wins. He's so excited to win. We love it. Thanks, Seth, Matt, Wes, for being here with us. Appreciate you guys. Last week we announced we hit 250 subscribers. So to celebrate our giveaway, we announced it at the beginning of the show. If you want to go back and look what you're going to win. But in order to win, I want you to drop a comment down below saying which duel I got wrong. Which one did I pick where I picked a winner and I just got it wrong? Tell me, I want to know, and give me a reason why. Not just, hey, Zach's better looking, you should have picked him in the duel that he lost. I don't want any of that. I want a specific reason. So drop that in the comments down below. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and you will be eligible to win. We will announce that winner in 2 weeks. So you've got 2 weeks to drop that comment down below. Again, thanks for watching. Have a great weekend. We'll see y'all back here for episode 18. Thanks, guys.